The Tata Steel Masters began today in the Netherlands, and my game of the day is Alireza Firouzja against Vladislav Kovalev. Thank you very much to Cav for advice on pronunciation. So here we go. The 16-year-old prodigy from Iran who's currently playing under the FIDE flag. He's kind of defected from Iran and is now living in Paris. Now he's playing Kovalev from Belarus, who did fantastically well in the Challengers tournament last year. He won it by a mile, and that meant he qualified for the Masters this year. And we saw Kovalev in the Isle of Man almost defeating Magnus Carlsen, so he's no slouch. We have a mainline Spanish, and it is the so-called Zaitsev variation with bishop b7. Well, this really was the height of fashion in the 1980s when Kasparov and Karpov did battle in this line in the World Championship matches. And really, it's sort of gone out of fashion since then. I'm not exactly sure why. Well, probably because Kasparov really got the measure of Karpov in this variation. That's probably why. He won some spectacular games with it. But I just have a funny feeling that with computer research that this line might be making a comeback. Who knows? Well, I'm sure that's why Kovalev played it today. And this is the main line. So you can see that White is carrying out this usual advance on the queen side with a4 to weaken the advanced pawn on b5. So this is standard Spanish practice. And Black needs counterplay. So that's why Black exchanges on d4 and puts the knight on b4. Would like to exchange off knight for bishop. That would be quite a gain. And you can see that this bishop has to keep protecting the pawn on e4 because the knight, bishop and rook are hitting that central pawn. So it drops back to b1 and c5. So you can see how Black is getting some kind of counterplay on the queen side and in the middle. So White blocks out the bishop on b7, and that means that, well, White is secure for the moment. But now we have an interesting position where White has this central control, but Black now has this kind of majority of pawns on the queen side. And the knight, well, stands pretty well on b4 as well. And here, well, I mentioned, these famous games between Kasparov and Karpov, which from this point went knight to d7 and then rook a3. And in my database, there are over 450 games played from this position. And, well, there was some crazy games with that. But it's interesting, if I flicked on my computer to examine this position, and it actually gives c4 ahead of knight d7. Now, that was only with a few seconds running the machine, but it shows that a lot of these old lines can be revived with computer research actually. So that was played by Kovalev, obviously prepared, and Firouzja thought for 6 minutes and played knight d4, which looks like a very natural move. And here, well, why not queen b6? Defending the pawn and attacking the knight. But instead of that, Kovalev thought for about 9 minutes and played knight d7. And this is pretty peculiar. So it's a funny mix of this old line with knight e7 and combining it with c4. Because here, there is absolutely nothing wrong with taking the pawn on b5. Now, in these old lines, this pawn is sometimes sacrificed, but here, really, black has very little to show for this pawn. You can see that the bishop is just way out of play. Very often in these lines, the bishop would find its way to a6 to perhaps support the knight on d3, but that's just not happening here. But Kovalev tried to stir things up with queen b8, but knight a3. So this pawn is looking very vulnerable as well. Remember, black is already one pawn down. Knight d3. Now here is a crunch moment in the game, and well, Firouzja had obviously thought this through, and you know, this is where calculation really helps. You know, the secret of good technique, good calculation. You know, you could be sloppy here, and if you just wanted to avoid complications, you could just take the knight off. But black might gain some counterplay with the knight coming here and pawn to f5, and then, you know, if black can get the pawn in the middle. Instead, Firouzja had a good think, and he played rook e3. Well, he thought on the previous turn. This is really important. So the obvious move for black is to take the pawn on b2, but watch what happens now. So I should say that in the game, knight takes bishop was played. But if knight takes pawn, then queen c2. Now from nowhere, white gets a winning attack. Watch this. Knight takes and knight takes. Now if white had to just recapture here, then black, well, yes, he's a pawn down, but there are chances to fight there. But here is the point. e5, threatening mate in 1. And after g6, e6 completely blows up the king side, undermining the support for the pawn on g6, and, well, basically the threat to take here and to take here, and then to recapture the knight. Black is falling apart in this position. So this is what both players were actually calculating in this position. It's what Firouzja had seen when he played rook e3. So black cannot take on b2 and therefore had to play knight takes bishop. You can see that Kovalev thought for 27 minutes over this move. He clearly didn't want to do it because it means that after queen takes knight, white is simply going 2 pawns up. So Kovalev brings the dark squared bishop into the game, but that's the only thing going for him in this position. White is 2 pawns up. This bishop is still blocked out of the game. And now it's a case of just playing solidly and sensibly. I like this rook switch. This is very nice. It targets that bishop. It's a really poor piece. And you never know when the rook might be able to penetrate on the a file as well. I mean, white has all the usual advantages, the space advantage of the Spanish, where, you know, he's still looking at this pawn on d6, so often a weak point. And the technique was very good. Queen d1. And queen comes to a4. Nice active move. Looking at this square, looking at this square. And, well, as we'll see, looking down here as well. 2 pawns up. Everything nice and solid. Knight e5 played. And again, just a little bit of calculation involved here, but not too tricky. Here, well, black should probably just recapture here, but it's obviously just very good for white. But Kovalev checked and then recaptured, but this allowed a pretty simple finish. So first of all, knight c4, attacking the bishop. which moved, and now queen e8 check. Going in for the kill. We know that Firouzja is very good at attacking. Rook f3 hitting here. And after f6, the king was exposed on the 7th. And now there's a simple little just zigzag with the queen. When the king comes up, then queen here check. And you can take the rook, for example. It's funny, it reminds me very much of the finish to the game that I just looked at in the video I recorded just a couple of days ago of a game by Firouzja, also in a Spanish, where he suddenly finished off with a nice attack along the diagonal with the queen and finished off the king, which was exposed along the 7th rank. It's uncanny, the similarity. Once again, Firouzja using his space advantage in the Spanish. You can check out that game if you just click on the eye down there. You'll see it. So, great start for the 16-year-old Iranian. There was only one other decisive game in the first round, and that was between Jon van Forest and Yu Yang, and the Dutchman won. So that's a nice game for Van Forest. Carlsen played Giri. That game fizzled to a draw pretty quickly. Disappointing game for Carlsen, who played with the white pieces, but Giri could be very happy. He played very solidly. So there we go. More videos coming your way during the tournaments. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And if you want to support us, then do check out the links to PayPal and to patreon.com. Thanks for watching.